Welcome to Disengaged, the podcast. I'm Leah Harding, your host. I was dating a really tall guy. I mean, like super tall. And I liked him a lot. But then he started doing things and saying things that I'm like, this is complete malarkey. The lying, the deceit, the complete changing of narratives. And I was like, this is not what I've signed up for. And a friend of mine was like, why do you let him treat you like this? And I was like, I think it's because he's tall. Does being tall make you toxic? This week on the pod, we have Dr. Susan Heitler, a clinical psychologist and a couples therapist with over 40 years of experience. She's a Harvard graduate with a doctorate from NYU and has authored multiple self-help books. Her TEDx talk has nearly 2 million views on YouTube, and her contributions to Psychology Today have been read more than 24 million times. She's written about everything from conflict resolution to the dynamics we're talking about today, a term she coined, tall man syndrome. Dr. Heitler, welcome to Disengaged. It is a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.
So you're 5'2". Arguably every man is a tall man to you. Can you explain how chairs in your office led you to this theory of tall man syndrome?
I got complaints from several husbands in a row. I was mostly seeing clients that were couples. Where can I sit? This chair is not deep enough for me. I realized, he's very tall. I'm not used to tall people. When I buy chairs that fit me. So I went out and bought a tall, a man's type chair, a deep, comfortable chair with plenty of room for a man's legs. As I looked at my caseload, I realized I had 3 tall men, all of whom were very narcissistic. Now, again, tall means bigger than other people. There are many ways to be bigger than other people. These particular men had it from long legs. One can be taller by being a celebrity. One can be taller by having more money than other people. One can be taller by being generally smarter or a better athlete. The point is to be above others in some way. By the way, I love working with narcissists. And when I say narcissist, I want to modify that. People with narcissistic tendencies. Narcissism as a character disorder carries these traits much further, and they rigidify, so there's not much change or movement once somebody is what we would label a character disorder. What I'm talking about is functioning in a narcissistic way. People who are narcissistic or have those tendencies tend to see a lot of the world and people as in a hierarchy. Who's bigger than, who's a better athlete, who's smarter, who has more money, so anybody who feels one up as opposed to on a par with is at risk.
Yeah, one of your articles, you gave an example of a little kid named Mike.
Uh-huh.
A tall little boy named Mike that you observed when you were picking up children from a school. I think your grandkids, maybe.
Oh, I remember. So I was standing at the door of the classroom watching the preschool 3 and 4-year-olds. One boy was significantly taller than the other children. He would go around, see what the other kids were doing, and knock it over the blocks they were doing, and then walk somewhere else, and nobody peeped. He'd walk to another group of kids, and he'd pick up the truck they were playing with and take it for himself. I thought, what is going on here? And then I realized he's able to do that because the other kids look up to him, and also they're afraid to confront him. So he learned early on that I have rights and privileges that other people don't have, that I can do whatever I want.
So when you were talking about Mike in the article that I was reading, I could not help myself but to think of Mike in like 20 years when I'm on a dating app and I'm swiping and he stands out because simply he's tall. Because you can even put on tall preferences on dating apps and not even see people below like 6'3". You can literally block them out of your dating experience. And so when I like go on a date with Mike, you know, I am seeing those same traits today where it is obvious that he has gotten away with stuff because of something. I wasn't able to put two and two together until I actually dated a super tall guy.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, there's like this distance between like his perception and reality.
So being tall alone doesn't mean they're going to be narcissistic. It's just a risk factor to pay attention to. And again, tall means more of any positive quality, more money, more fame, more intelligence, more fancy college, whatever.
Why is that? Why as a society, or maybe as a species even, I was reading that like going back to like hunter-gatherer days, like women would prefer taller men because it meant more security or that they would have possibly a higher level of respect in the community. Like, is this built in to us as humans to prefer taller people?
I hadn't thought of that question before. Certainly, we go for the best that we can get. So it might be the most kindly, it might be the most able to earn a good living. That's, and we have to be careful about the most because usually when we're picking a partner, we look at a range of traits. So again, being tall and being narcissistic also, even if you're short, are amongst an array of traits. If you have a narcissistic partner, and I'll explain why as we go on, it's important that you yourself not fall into the trap of being one down, but rather see yourself as an equal.
So, do you teach that when you're sitting down with someone in your office?
Uh, yes, I sit down with couples primarily. One reason why the habits that I consider as central to narcissism are not part of the standard definition. Why is that? One reason is because most therapists just work one-on-one. So they're aware of what the person seems like with them. At the same time, they haven't seen them in their natural habitat, which is interacting with their partner. That's when these traits are at risk for really coming out.
Do you think that's optimistic to think that they can change, or have you seen them change?
I've seen there's a range, there's a whole spectrum of flexibility and ability to learn. Remember, there are people often who want to be the best. So if you can mobilize their desire to be the best husband or wife, it's sometimes women, although more often men. Oh, I want to be a really top-rate husband. Oh, then you need to add this skill. Well, they don't like to be corrected or criticized. So it's important for me or for the wife, let's assume it's a man, and your audience is mostly women, so I'm going to say to the women, they need to get clever. So rather than saying you're doing it wrong, you never do that with them. You can either say something about you, gee, I'm having trouble getting this point across to you. I don't seem to be saying it clearly. And then they'll sometimes perk up more. Or, you're such a good husband. You know, it occurred to me there's one more skill if you added it. So it's all in the positive. I've read about this amazing thing that wives love husbands who respond to what they say by saying yes and adding to it instead of by saying no or but and pushing it off the table. What do you think about that? In other words, you engage them in the process and you talk about it as learning a skill.
I mean, that's a lot of energy to do that. Obviously, you would need to want to stay in
Yes,
that relationship.
yes. Often there's a reason why you want to stay in the relationship. They may be very good with the kids, they may earn a good living, They may be very fun in social situations. They may be very intelligent and interesting. If you can get them to also listen to you, you can sometimes have very interesting conversations with them. There are other things. They may be a great sexual partner. They may be a good cook.
What would you caution someone? What would a life with someone on the spectrum like this,
Right.
what would that require as a spouse?
So people often talk about on the spectrum in terms of less or more of something. They also use that phrase to talk about autism. People say, gee, I think he's a little bit on the spectrum, meaning what we used to call, well, meaning that there's a tendency to be autistic-like or all the way to very autistic. So what's the nature of autism? One of the aspects of autism is a low level of, some people call it situational awareness. Um, it can be a low level of ability to understand what's going on with other people. Remember, I talked about theory of mind that develops around age 3 or 4, ability to see things from someone else's point of view. So, to the extent that a person lacks that ability, they're beginning to look like they're on the spectrum, uh, uh, on the autism spectrum. So I sometimes say, oh, narcissism is the last stop on the train before you cross into the territory of the autistic spectrum. There's actually a lot of overlap.
That's fascinating. How so?
First of all, genetically, sometimes if you look at someone who's narcissistic and look at their parents or look at their family system, you'll find other people with that same trait and a fair amount of something autistic-like. And if you look at their children, they have high likelihood of having children who are, in fact, on the spectrum, at
Autistically.
autistically. At the same time, people now talk about people who are higher functioning on the spectrum as having a developmental disorder that they actually grow out of over time. What's the developmental disorder? Often it's ability to understand what's going on with other people. They may be very sympathetic, like if someone's crying. At the same time, they don't get it why if they say something that's too frank, the other person who's listening is going to have their feelings hurt.
So if you're dating someone like that, if it's on a spectrum in that same way, I think that for me, that would allow me to maybe approach the situation with a little bit more grace.
More grace and more wisdom, and most importantly, less risk of taking it personally.
But also not being ignorant to what that could mean for you and your life.
Absolutely, much more savvy. Oh, I'm signing up to be with someone who's going to have a hard time hearing me. At core, it's a listening disorder.
Narcissism is?
That's the way I defined it. Narcissistic tendencies mean that somebody has difficulty really hearing other people. The flip side of that is on the, dialogue involves talking and listening, like baseball is throwing and catching.
Okay, so in my experience, when I dated this really tall guy,
Uh-huh.
he made a lot of errors. Okay, like I'm talking lying, consistent lying, covering up truths about his past, not able to even accurately tell me like what he actually did that day. Everything was a little vague. There was things at play, and something that one of my friends has said is like, well, like why are you still with him? And they were like, well, it's because he's tall. Like because he's tall, and that's like desired. it like covers over a multitude of sins. You get to this point where, I mean, I was to the point of like, I am getting really nothing out of this except anxiety and like stomach ulcers, and I'm like picking my scalp, and I like hate honestly being around this person.
So that says to me, you stayed too long. It's
Certainly.
so it's so important to listen to what your body tells you. If you're feeling down after you've spent time with them, analyze what's happening. If you're getting stomach aches that seem to have something to do with being around him, oh, your stomach is talking to you. Pain is there to tell you something. There's a problem.
It doesn't just have to be a thought. It can be your body speaks too, which is something we've talked about on here.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's why it's so important to listen to pain and to listen to painful emotions like sadness or frustrated, because they also say there's something going on here that's not right.
But then, like for me, not to belabor a point, but this is about trying to dive into, you know, does a societal gold star, like being a tall, attractive man, cover over a multitude of sins? And in this case, I think I did stay too long because he was tall. I guarantee you, if this guy was a foot shorter, the first lie he told me, I would have never talked to him again. I liked how I felt around him in public.
Ah,
I'm not a short, small person. I'm 5'9", and my mom's 6'1". And so like I'm not used to feeling tiny. But when I was with this guy, I felt like that delicate femininity that people talk about. And I loved that. But that is what I put at a higher level than my own gut and sanity.
right. So you made the mistake of paying too much attention to just one dimension without looking at the full array of what that fellow brought to you.
But I see that in
Want to
several
comment?
with friends too. I'm like, I don't think you would be with him if he was literally a foot shorter.
Yes. Well, you used another word. I want to see if I can retrieve it. Or another fact about him. You had mentioned earlier on that he lied.
He couldn't tell a simple story factually. Like, what did you do today? Became this muddied, watered, and I was like, I don't even really know if you're telling the truth. Did you really go to lunch with John? Like, because the way you're telling this doesn't even sound like you did that. But why would you lie about that?
So when you see anything that looks not quite right, it's important to pay attention whether you're just dating someone initially, in which case you might really want to reassess if you want to go further, or if you're engaged, you might want to say, look, I want to look seriously at this and make sure it's under control. And if you're married, you have to look seriously. What can I do about this? That's lesson number one. Lesson number two, there are other danger signs other than narcissism. Narcissism is the non-listening, having to be above other people and dismissive of what they say. Lying, that's going on another continuum of sociopathy or psychopathy. Those words get used somewhat interchangeably. That's somebody who doesn't have a strong sense of right and wrong. And then when you talk about, was confused, he couldn't just give me a straight answer. That can be someone who does a lot of cover up. It can also be someone who just gets confused.
And I was scrolling on Instagram, I think is what it was, and I saw this quote that you can tell how a woman sees herself by the man she's dating. And I thought, well, isn't that a real eye opener? Because I'm with this guy because of how he makes me feel publicly, which means, am I not feeling powerful in my own right on my
That's
own?
very good. So certainly to ask yourself, why am I with this fellow is a good idea.
I don't think I was able to at the time, which is why I think this is an important conversation to have, is put those two together, almost seeing what about him as like successful, really how many sins am I allowing that one success to cover?
Right, right. And that's a 100% appropriate question to ask.
But then point to your point that you've written about is that this idea of a tall man syndrome, the tall man, if you see that as the success, being tall, it could also be translated into wealth. Like his tall
Right.
manness is coming out because he's super
Mm.
wealthy, but he might not actually be tall, but
Well,
he's having that.
you just set me up to tell another story about someone with very strong narcissistic habits,
And
tendencies.
is he like 4'5"?
Not 4'5", but I'm 5'2", so he was maybe 5'3" or 5'4". For men, he was on the shorter side. In what way was he tall? He made a lot of money because he was a very, very good businessman, very clever. He had also gone to an Ivy League school. He was very smart. He thought of, and probably since he was a little kid, he was smarter than anyone else in his class. That can be an asset, by the way, if you, as a therapist, when I see someone who's very smart, I like to hope they're not cognitively rigid, because smart plus cognitively flexible, that is, they can take in new ideas or work their thoughts around in new ways, that's someone who's going to learn a lot. If I could get him to the point where he would take in information. And fortunately, he was paying me enough money each session that he looked up to me. So he would take in information from me in a way that he wouldn't from his wife. I'll tell you the story he told me, though, that I found so apt. I go through life feeling as if I'm a knight in shining armor. I'm riding on a big white steed. Every so often, I stop galloping along and I look to see what's around me. I often can hear little voices coming from all the little people who are around my horse's hoofs. They're quiet, and if I work hard, I can really listen, but basically, I don't pay attention to those. I just notice that they're there and that they're admiring me, and then I gallop on.
Wow, what a humble guy.
Right. So arrogance is in the essence of it. At the same time, I give him huge credit because as he told me that story, he was laughing and he was telling me the story as a way to say, "Oh, I fit your picture of a tall man syndrome exactly, even though I'm short."
Well, so when
He
you're
learned,
talking to him, then what do you tell him? Like, if he's receptive, what are some of the tools you gave him, assuming there's maybe a
right.
tall syndrome person, man or woman, listening to this?
So I begin with flattery. You know, I'm very impressed. You fit what I call the syndrome of tall man syndrome. This is
You
something
tell
that,
him that.
yeah, they love it. And the difficulty is it's a habit that serves them poorly. It undermines their ability to to sustain a loving relationship. They also, if they have this habit, will tend to marry someone who's lovely, and then over time, their partner becomes either very depressed or very angry or anxious. They're not the same confident, happy person over time that they thought they had married. And that's because something you're doing without your realizing it has a very negative impact on your spouse.
Is it worth it if you have these signs before you're married? Would you counsel someone into trying to work through it if the other person isn't willing to listen or
It,
change?
I would counsel them to pay attention to it. Maybe find a therapist who understands the phenomenon and teaches communication and conflict resolution skills. Too many therapists only look backwards. Gee, I wonder how come you feel this way. I wonder what happened in your past. That da 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 da. Some of that's useful. It doesn't fix the problem. To fix the problem, people have to become very sophisticated about the skills for mature, mutually gratifying dialogue. That is, certain rules of talking, certain rules of uptake, so you take in information, rules of dialogue like symmetry and talking in short chunks rather than monologue. Symmetry, instead of one person taking up all the air in the room, more or less equal time. Those are dialogue habits. Digesting what the other person said, often starting with yes, and then sometimes followed by a question. So you're able to keep the focus on the other person. Those are skills people can learn.
But I guess there's a tipping point for people, right? Like a lot of what we talk about on this podcast is trusting your gut and trying to figure out how to listen to, when I say your gut, your whole body, you know?
Right,
And
right.
I guess there's a tipping point for people. You have to know, and it's different for everyone, what your threshold is.
There's a psychologist phrase, testing the limits. Test out how open they are to learning something new. Again, not by criticizing. For instance, if someone who's dating someone with some positive traits plus these Tallman syndrome habits, my book, The Power of Two, teaches how to do it right. And then there's a workbook because learning the theory, the idea isn't enough, you have to practice it. In addition, the two people can work together. It's not just up to the tall man to do the learning. And usually both of them need to learn. So on virtually every page, there's a little dialogue. On the left side is the couple that don't have these good skills. They demonstrate uh, skill deficits. And then on the right-hand column is another couple facing the same situation with the skills. If a couple can read these dialogues together, laugh about them, and learn together, oh, that's me. Oh, she did exactly what I do. Whoops, I guess I need to begin learning this. If that's the tone in which they are learning and they're learning together, there's hope. In addition, working on something like this is diagnostic. If it's not getting anywhere, or if the other person, the tall man syndrome person, has no interest in doing that, that's a lot.
I'll definitely put a link in our show notes. It's there for people to check out your books because that's a great resource.
Right. I have other books, so
I know
I
you have so
don't.
many books. I really respect that about
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
So what I'm hearing you say is growth mindset trumps everything.
Yes.
So if you are dating a tall man with any of the tall man syndrome elements on the whole spectrum, wealth, height, athleticism, you name it, if you're not seeing a growth mindset when you bring these
If
topics up,
yes,
hey,
if
when you
you're
say
seeing
this is how I feel, kind of a thing. If there's no reception there, then wave that red flag for yourself.
right, if you're seeing a block to being willing to learn, disinterest, resistance, defensiveness, listen, hear that, take that seriously.
Because it's hard to leave a tall man or a powerful man because of the doors that it can open for you and how it makes you feel. It starts messing with brain chemistry, and it's like finding a pot of gold. And why would you, go back to poverty, if once you found
Exactly.
this?
For
Feeling
that,
so small can feel like poverty in the long run.
so that means you have to make an internal decision. In both my latest book, Prescriptions Without Pills, uh, and also in The Power of Two, I talk about conflict resolution, that is, shared decision making or problem solving. Those are three words that all refer to the same process. That process is important between two people. It's also an inner process. So if you follow, for instance, in the workbook, There's a chart, a big chart. I'm not going to very well find it right now, but if you use that chart to map out the 3 steps of conflict resolution, at the end, you can come to a win-win solution. So win-win might be, I can see this person has strong tall man syndrome, and at the same time, he wants so much of the same things in life. He brings me this, he brings me that. I think I'm going to accept that that's him. I'm not going to take it personally when he doesn't listen to what I say. I'm just going to accept that's him, and you take the good with the bad. It'll work for me. Or when they list all their underlying concerns, if they're listing something like, I want somebody who feels like a real partner. I want someone who values me, and I can tell it because he's really listening to what I say. And when there's a decision to be made, my concerns are as important as his. Then you might say, this is a without which I'm not interested.
I think the beginning of dating tall men, I think, can be really good. And it
Uh-huh.
can serve as a reason to stay a little bit longer because the beginning was so good. Changing your mind, being able to change your mind.
Data from research that backs up what you said. A study was they had people who were to play the role of a narcissist who knew how to, so they were the stooges in a sense. And the stooge went into new groups. So in each group, at the beginning, after the first meeting, people would rate how much they liked people in the group. Typically, the narcissists would come out way on top. They perform well, charming, fun, good ideas, a sense of a presence, etc. Over time, that changed, and by the end of a series of, say, 10 sessions, I don't remember exactly how many, the narcissists tend to be ranked on the bottom of who people in the group liked the best and trusted the most. So you're describing the same thing when you first meet someone like this. Oh, wow. And then over time, if that's decreasing a whole lot, pay attention to that.
Thank you so much for your time. You're incredibly brilliant, and I've loved picking your brain.
Thank you.
Thank you for
My
coming on the
pleasure.
podcast.
And thank you for giving me a chance to tell your listeners or viewers about both the Power of Two book and workbook, and also about prescriptions without pills. Because if you don't upgrade your skills enough for dialogue, for shared problem solving, for dealing with anger, etc., in a relationship, you're at risk for depression, anger, anxiety. This book then becomes helpful.
This episode was produced by the Anthology Group.